All right, I had a request to do a video on the bones that we went over today. So we're going to start with the mandible. First part of the mandible we're going to talk about is the ramus. This is the vertical portion right here. Then we've got the angle or the corner right here, the angle of the mandible. We have the condyle that's in the back. That is what articulates with the glenoid or mandibular fossa of the temporal bone. We have the mandibular notch. The front portion is the coronoid process, which leads down into the coronoid notch, which is going to be important for our local anesthetic landmarks. If we keep following that coronoid notch down, we take it down the external oblique ridge on the outside. We have the retromolar pad, which is right behind the last molar. If we look on the inside, we have the mandibular foramen, which is the opening where the inferior alveolar nerve goes into the mandibular canal, which is within the mandible. We have the lingula, which is the bony protrusion, which protects the mandibular foramen and the inferior alveolar nerve. We have the mylohyoid groove right down here that kind of points into the submandibular fossa where the submandibular salivary gland sits. If we followed above the submandibular fossa, we've got the mylohyoid ridge, and you can see that this line right here on the inside of the retromolar pad is the internal oblique ridge, and then it kind of follows down into the mylohyoid ridge. So the internal oblique kind of turns into the mylohyoid ridge if we follow it down, where the coronoid notch follows down into the external oblique. If we look at the mandible from the front, we have the body of the mandible, which is located between the teeth and the mental protuberance. The mental, another word for chin, is kind of the part that sticks out on the front here on the chin. So the mental protuberance protrudes. Then we've got the mental ridge, which goes off to each side. On either side of that mental protuberance is the mental ridge. We have the symphysis, which goes right down the middle of the body of the mandible. We have a mental foramen on each side in the chin area where the mental nerve comes out and actually innervates the tissues of the chin. If we look from the inside, we turn it around here, and we look at the midline area. Where the screw is where the lingual foramen is. And then we've got two bony protrusions on either side of this that are the genial tubercles, which will serve as muscle attachments when we get into the muscles unit. On either side of this are the sublingual fossas. So fossas are shallow and wide, so sublingual fossa underneath this area for the sublingual salivary glands versus the submandibular fossa, which is a little bit further back underneath the mylohyoid ridge. Submandibular fossa houses the submandibular salivary glands. Now this is an actual real skull, or real mandible, I should say. And these are the genial tubercles. We talk about two bony protrusions. And then we've got the lingual foramen right underneath that. You can see the fossa right here underneath the mylohyoid ridge. You can see the real mandibular foramen, and the lingula is a little bit more of a protrusion right there. We can see the condyle, which articulates with the glenoid fossa. There is a little place right here on the front of the condyle that's called the pterygoid fovea, which serves as a muscle attachment, which we'll learn about later. And then here's the mandibular notch, coronoid process, coronoid notch in front of the coronoid process, which runs down into our external oblique ridge. Here's our ramus, angle of the mandible. As we start coming around, mental foramen, symphysis down the middle, body of the mandible between the teeth and the mental protuberance, which is that part that protrudes on the chin. And then here's our mental ridge right here. Coming in for the mylohyoid groove that kind of runs right from the mandibular foramen down towards the submandibular fossa. Here's the internal oblique ridge that kind of runs you into the mylohyoid ridge. And then remember, the mandibular canal is within the mandible. Goes halfway and then comes from the other side and goes halfway. They kind of meet in the middle. So that is your mandible and all of the structures that you need to know for your mandible.